getting ready for our 44th biannual Montgomery Art Guild museum show, and that's the Montgomery Museum of Fine Arts exhibition. And we do that every 2 years. And this year is the year. And so we're really excited about it. We've been preparing for it for the past several months. Warren Simons and Bob Corley have been doing a great job of getting those donations in and sponsorships. We have over $11,000 in prize award money this year. So we're real excited to have that. And so, we haven't seen that kind of award money in a couple of years, I believe. So that's a big deal to us, to the artists, to the museum, and we are so grateful to our sponsors. And we'll be putting a list of those sponsors on our website and in some of our emails so that you guys can thank those people in person whenever you see them. And we will continue to ask for sponsorships or, cash prize money. So if you know anyone that would love to give to the Montgomery Art Guild or the museum in order to fund this show, the money goes to prize money. It also goes to doing the actual catalog, printing it. We normally have a reception. We're not sure if there will be a reception this year. We haven't prepared for that yet due to COVID, of course, but the show will be in-house in the museum and it'll be up all summer long. So it's a huge honor for any artist to be displayed in the Montgomery Museum of Fine Arts, because it brings people from all over to view the art, and you guys are hanging on the walls, with your peers, and it's a lot of fun to be able to say that you hung, in the museum, and it's a treasure for your piece and for your tradition, and certainly an honor. So we're grateful to the museum for hosting this with us. And the deadline for the entries is March 20th. So if you guys are, I'm sorry. Oh, we must have some background noise. So March 20th is the deadline for the entries. And if you guys don't have anything right now, that gives you plenty of time to hopefully create something. And I would encourage you to enter as many pieces as possible. And we'll probably go into that a little bit as to why you want to submit more than one or two pieces to a competition. I'm sure that somebody will highlight that a little bit and talk about it. But even if you feel like it's not your best work, try to work on it a little bit, get it to where it needs to be, and then submit it. But those entries are digital and online, and you can go to our website to find those at www.montgomeryartguild.org. And if you need more information, you can always email us, and that's at artguildmontgomery@gmail.com. You can email us anytime. Warren and I receive those emails directly, and we try to respond to them as promptly as we can, usually within 24 hours. So if you're having issues getting your entry online, then please email us and we'll be happy to help any way we can. And we can do that virtually. We don't have to do it in person, thank goodness. So Warren, do we have a pretty full attendance? Should we?
Yes, I think we should go ahead and start. We have 17 participants.
Great.
If anybody else joins as we go along, I'll just patch them in.
Great. Yeah, I think some people are probably trying to finish up dinner and so on and so forth. So tonight we are doing a special talk, and it's due to the fact that the museum show is coming up, and we were talking about having another benefit to our members by having a gathering of some sort. And since we can't do it in person, we thought we'd do it virtually, of course. So what we decided was that we thought you guys might want to hear why an artist might want to enter an art competition. Who is entering these art competitions? What are they entering into these competitions? How do they do it? How do they decide? How do they go about, selecting their pieces? So we're going to talk about all those topics tonight. And this is a very informal talk. So if you guys want to chime in and say something, please feel free to speak up at any time and ask a question. this talk is more for you and maybe somebody that you know, so that you can encourage them to enter an art competition. Tonight, the people that will be speaking is Warren Simons. He's our Montgomery Art Guild president. Joan DeLaura, she is one of our board members and has been for quite a while. Sunny Palk, who is also one of our board members, and we're very fortunate to have her. And then, of course, we have several members and non-members that are joining us tonight. So welcome all of you. Thank you so much for coming, and I hope that you can get some good information out of this. But our topic tonight is preparing, entering competitions and why we do that. So the first topic that I wanted to talk about is who enters these competitions. And I'm going to call on Sunny Palk to see if she can help us with this topic here. Sunny, who do you think is a prime candidate for entering art competitions?
I really think anybody at any age, student or otherwise, if somebody just started painting during quarantine, you know, that's fair game too. For me personally, it between college and now, oh, I would say 5 years ago, for me, the barrier was mostly money. But I was going to the art shows every year and just seeing what got selected, what, you know, what won prizes, what sort of dynamic changed over the years, like from the Art Guild 20 years ago to now, which is a much more diverse in race and age. And, you know, I just feel like it's a lot more accessible now. So that, for me, I think anybody should enter. And if you don't get accepted, that's okay. I mean, Warren and I were talking about neither one of us got accepted to the Regents show last. So if the president of the Art Guild doesn't make it into the Art Guild's show, you know, maybe, you know, that's, you know, that's just how it goes sometimes. But I would say, you know, if you don't feel ready, I would at least go hang out at a few shows and see gauge how comfortable you feel entering.
That's a very good point. I think, you know, everybody kind of wants to enter an art competition at some point in their career, or they, you know, wonder, how do people get into it? Going to some of the shows after the juror has made their selection and seeing what has been entered and selected gives you a really good idea. But of course, that always changes, right? So, Sunny, I think you mentioned at one time you were kind of inspecting these shows, I think the Regents Bank show in particular. And tell us about that experience when you were, you know, early on in your art career.
Sure. So I'm more of an expressionistic painter. I do portraits mostly, some abstracts more recently. But when I was going to the shows earlier on, you know, 10, 20 years ago, all I saw were landscapes and, you know, still lifes and not really a lot of my style. So I didn't really feel like that was going to fit me well. But as I said before, in more recent years, I started to see that variety of work grow. And so I felt like, okay, I could maybe enter and, you know, get in and or at least enjoy other people's work, you know, which is always true for any show.
Right. So you felt like maybe earlier on, it just wasn't your place. You know, you didn't care for that style. Maybe it wasn't the style you were working in. You were drawn to something a little different. So maybe you thought your work wouldn't be accepted, or you just didn't feel like it was something that you wanted to participate in. But then maybe down the road a little bit, you saw a little bit more diversity, and
That's right.
Thought that maybe, you know, it was your time and your place, and maybe you had a voice there on the walls. So that's nice. I'm glad to hear that. We've worked really hard to try to be more inclusive and find out what people are doing, you know, in our community, because that show is for everyone here. We want to be able to provide a place for everybody to feel like they can compete and that they can have a place and a voice. So that's nice. I'm glad to hear that.
I
But
think if I could just add a few more things, I think Sunny touched on one thing, which is that she was sort of scoping out the landscape. The landscape. Um, she was going to receptions and seeing what was being displayed. I think, when you start wondering what I should be submitting to, maybe you don't have a history of having done that. I think that's a good idea, is to go to some shows, look at the receptions, look at what's on the wall. Um, Find out, because these things are usually reported, find out how many people submitted and how many people were accepted into the show. It helps give you an idea of how competitive it is. Look at the work, look at your work, compare them. I'm not saying compare them in the sense of, well, I guess there is a certain amount of looking at subject matter and medium, but look at where you think you're at and look at other people's work and try and judge from your own point of view where you think theirs is at and where yours might fit into that. And the other thing is, it's always nice to win a cash prize. So it's not the thing that drives me, but when there are shows that have pretty sizable cash awards, it's always a little bit of a siren call to want to think about submitting, even if I don't think it's exactly the show that fits me. But anyhow.
yeah, and I've seen a lot of artists that have come through over the years and have entered their works, and some of them entered 4 pieces and nothing got in, and they were early on in their career, and as they developed their skill set, they came back and entered their pieces again, and they were accepted. And that's a lot of it, is to grow as an artist, is to kind of challenge yourself. Are you ready for that challenge? And I think we all have to start somewhere, and we have to put that fear aside. Oh my gosh, they're going to see this. What are they going to think of it? What are my peers going to think? Are they going to think, oh, she's crazy for putting that piece of artwork in? What was she thinking? That was a lot of my frustration in the beginning, was because I had not really shared much of my work with other people. I really wasn't sure if it would be appropriate. I just wasn't sure if it was going to be show ready. So I think that's part of the first step. And that's one of the reasons that we enter competitions, is so that we can see, have we grown enough? Are we ready for that type of platform? And where is it going to lead us? So there are amateurs that are going to be entering. There are professionals that are entering, of course, and you begin to start to see and recognize these names. And it just helps you start to put yourself in a place as you start to grow. So I think it's a great thing. It's a scary thing. It's exhilarating. It's all of those things. But gosh, what an exciting feeling when you do get accepted into the show. I've been rejected myself many, many times. I've sat and watched. I will never forget. I worked a show when we were taking them in by hand, and the juror would come in and select them. And I remember this one year, she was just throwing them out the door left and right. And I watched one go out, I watched 2 go out. I thought, okay, I've got 2 more. And then, 3 and 4, the 4th one went out the door, and I just was sick to my stomach. I thought, man, I just want to go home, but I still had to work. I still had to, help everybody with all their entries and help the juror, finish up. And so we still had a long day ahead, and you're just heartbroken.
Mhm.
So it's an emotional roller coaster, but it's definitely one that is worth going on, in my opinion. You just got to take that first step.
And I think to add on to that, it's good to take advantage of the fact that the shows are local, that you have it, you don't have to ship anything, you can go and see them. It's easy to bring them down when you are accepted. And it is scary, just like everyone said, the first time, but it pushes you. You have to look at your work and say, you have to choose what you're going to enter, and you have to really think about it, and it might stretch you. And then there's so much that's involved with it. You have to learn about exactly, you can go in a show and just look how they're framed, and you can just meet people. And there's so much that goes with it. So, and I said, Katie said she was interested in watercolor. There's 2 organizations here, but we usually have to ship your work. So I said, it's so nice when you can just carry it down to the Regions Bank and you put it up and you see everybody and you say hello, and it's so much fun. And when you ship something with watercolor, you have to put plexiglass on it, and they make special boxes like air float system, and you put it in and it's all packed up, and you send it, and you send with a little receipt that they can send it back to you. So it's a very different thing than if you go and you see your friends. And so it's very nice. So I recommend trying, if you haven't done shows, to definitely start with the local, because we have such a diversity that is accepted. It's sculpture, it's pottery, it's all kinds of art, and the juror is always different, and they're very knowledgeable, and they like all different types of art. So whatever you have, give it a shot.
That's a very good, thank you for bringing up that topic, because we were going to talk about what is entered next. So I'm glad you brought that up, Joan. Sunny, would you mind telling us a little bit about some of the artwork that you've seen, since you were kind of touching on that a little while ago? What type of artwork is entered at these shows?
Oh gosh, everything now, which I love. And we briefly mentioned jurors. What their style is depends on what makes it in, right? And so for me, doing portrait work, I've entered the same portraits in different shows, and one got in one show and the other, it didn't get in the other show. So I don't know, what you all have some thoughts on jurors and maybe checking them out before you submit, which I think we were going to talk about, but
yeah, so I think Joan has a really good thought about that.
I did look into that actually for this talk, because I've actually myself have not investigated the juror. They give you the name, but I've never looked into who they are, because I just try to evaluate my work and I put what I consider the best. And then, so we were talking about it and said, some people read up on the juror. And so I was asking someone, and they said that, I like this example, because you can find out about the juror and read about them. Like the one for the museum show is an art historian. It sounds just very, very qualified, and it's fun on the website. She speaks, and it's just very interesting to listen to her. But if you can't tailor what you do to try to guess what the judge is going to like. Someone gave me the example. They said, if you were going out on a date and you knew that this person liked blondes with black clothes and to talk about horses, so you did all that, but it's not you, you can't, they might not like you anyway. You just really have to be true to yourself. And then sometimes you can get to a level where you can investigate. There are certain shows around the country that specialize in Western art. And if that's what you do, you can look and see where jurors are looking for Western art, and you could submit your art there. That's on a different level. And they might have abstract shows, and they have conceptual art shows. So I think it's very good to see who's judging the show, but I don't think it makes, on our local level, I don't think it makes a difference to what you submit. I think you should submit your artwork that represents you and your, what you think is your best.
Yeah, I think there's a fine line between looking at who the juror is and thinking about how you might tailor your work to that person. The things that I've looked at on the internet about this very question, a number of them say that a lot of jurors don't like when that happens. They consciously, they can recognize it, and of course they're comparing it to, if they're an artist, they're comparing it to their work. Is it better? Is it worse? In their subjective opinions. or an art curator or an art historian or somebody who teaches. They all have a different set of experiences to view that through. So I always look at who the judge is and I give it some thought. But then ultimately, for instance, for the museum show, I've got two different bodies of work that I've been working on for a while now. And I think it's the strongest work that I've done so far in terms of creating a body of work. And I've decided that even though I could tailor what I'm doing a little bit more specifically for the judge, it really wouldn't be what's resonating and, just making my heart pound right now. So I think what Joan said is what I'm going to do, which is to, submit what I think is my best work or my strongest work currently. And I'm a photographer, and I belong to several different camera organizations, and one of them is in Atlanta. And I got a chance last week to show a body of this work to them. And it was a critique, and it was really, really helpful because they really helped me see. So I'm seeing all the work. I love it all. It's wonderful. And they look at it, they're removed from that part of it. They see it and respond to it. And they just were so good at helping me realize that there was a subset of work in there that really is the essence of the best of that work. So I think Lisa may have mentioned this, showing your work to other people, a group of trusted artist friends, whoever it might be, your relatives, somebody who can, evaluate it a little bit more objectively than you might, is helpful.
Lauren, can I throw something in here? I think it's easy to overthink all of this. You get into the trying to figure out what is this particular jury or judge going to like? What is their background? You start overthinking it and you forget that it really is about your art, what you like, and what people have told you that they like as well. And the rest of it is kind of like a crapshoot.
Yeah.
That's very true. Thank you, Tim, for your input. I have enjoyed seeing your work always, and I'm really glad that you started entering. And it wasn't too long ago, was it?
Listen, you were a big supporter from the very early, from the very beginning of my entering contests and competitions, and I appreciate that back, kind of the back that you gave me.
Yeah, well, and that started from just a conversation. We met. We talked about what we like to do, and we were both artists, and we shared our work immediately. We had them on our phones. So everybody has images of their work on their phone, they carry it around, so don't be shy, share your work. I was just enamored with his work immediately. And I said, are you showing this anywhere? And you weren't. So and I think you won an award that year,
Yes.
Right? Yeah, I've been very fortunate.
First place at the region show in the photography category.
Is my blushing showing?
We see a lot of those first timers that win awards, and it's incredible. And I remember one year at the Regions Bank show, one of our members was battling cancer and had just finished her chemo treatments, and she entered the show with some of her abstract work, and she won first place. And I was just so happy for her. That's something that many people probably didn't know about her, but it probably just made her whole year to have that award. And she probably didn't have many hours that she invested into that work, didn't have time to do other things, but was able to put some time into her work. And so that was nice to see that happen. And I've seen some amazing other things that have happened like that. But back to the point of knowing when is your work ready. Warren did mention that I talked about this a little bit, but I think I get asked this a lot from a lot of my students is when do you know you're ready to start submitting work? Joan, would you like to talk about that a little bit?
When to submit, I would just, I know this is not the best answer, but I would just submit it There's no time like the present. You learn, test through fire. Like I said, it's local, it's easy, it's no one's going to see them. It's a digital, you're not carrying it in somewhere and you say, oh, and then, you probably are going to be successful. But you've all heard the story about someone who was rejected from one show and then, another show they'll win first place. That it's hard not to judge yourself, but I guess you have to just submit and try not to be discouraged. I would say just keep going, because there's a lot more that goes with the show. Because if you submit and you go, we're going to talk about this more, but my favorite thing of the show is the jurors' critique. I love when, even if you don't have something in the show, when you go around and the juror, a lot of them are very articulate, not always, but they say why they chose what they chose. I'm there with a notebook. I've got a pen. I'm writing notes. I still have them over the years. I go back and I look, and I've just learned so much from that. So even if you don't enter the show, come to the jurors' critique and you'll learn so much in just about composition. And one time, it depends on what that juror is interested in, but one juror went around and he talked about the framing. And a lot of times as artists, we don't put a lot of thought into framing. It's an expense, I have this, and I'll tailor it to go with that. So it was just interesting to hear the judge, and we'll talk more about that, but to hear what they looked at. So you can learn so much, and you will be ready for the next one. If maybe you don't get in the first one, you will definitely, get in a second show. And there's, it's fun just to enter the state fair, everybody's in that show and you can just see them hanging, and there's all different types of shows too. So
Yeah, and some shows are juried,
yeah,
which means there's a competition and a layer of people aren't going to make it. But then there were other shows, like you said, like the State Fair, where everybody is welcome to submit work and it all goes on the wall. And so I'm with Joan. I'm for submitting to all of them. Because every time you do, and every time you think through the process of what should I show, how should I frame it, all the different aspects that go into preparing for that, and then having to be under the pressure of meeting a deadline so that it can be actually ready to submit. All of that's a very good thing to go through. And so some of those shows you're in no matter what, and others you're competing with others. But I think all of it together is a very good process, a very good experience to be working on and going through.
I agree. And it's like we were saying earlier, and Elisa pointed out that, you grow through this experience. You always grow when you put yourself out of your comfort zone, but also you get better every time. Just like anything you do that you practice, you get better at it. It gets easier. It doesn't crush you when you get rejected, but it gets easier every time.
Well, I'll tell you, I grew a lot since my first show. I visited, I think it was the museum show several years ago. I had wanted to kind of get into the art scene here, and I'd been painting at home, and really I didn't have a peer group at all. I didn't know any other artists. I wasn't in a community of artists. So I looked around at the museum show and I thought, well, I can do this. I've been painting for a while, and now that I look back on it, there were a lot of very skilled artists that I looked at their work and thought there wasn't much skill there. But now that I am a skilled artist and I have many years behind me, I have realized that until you have tried it, don't knock it. So there's still always so much to learn. As I know a lot of here, that there's always room for growth. You never, I know 80-year-old artists that are still learning, and there's just so much to learn from there. But so one of the things I wanted to talk about is, my students will ask me, well, how do I know my skill level is there and I'm ready? So I have a few little tips for that. I have a little feedback crew. I call it my feedback crew. And if you're on my feedback crew, don't laugh. But I have a couple of different feedback crews. One is going to be what I call my non-educated artist. So it's somebody that is not an artist. It is somebody that knows nothing about art. They didn't go to art school. They didn't study art. They don't know a lick about drawing. That is my feedback crew that I usually go to when I am working on a painting and I know that there is an issue, but I can't really quite predict what it is. So this type of person can be a child. Children are great at looking at something and knowing, well, the nose is, right, supposed to be right here, or the eyes are, they're a little off this way, or, that tree is blue, it's supposed to be green. So somebody that's non-educated. And what I tell people is when you ask somebody for their feedback, don't take it personally. Look at it as a learning experience, and they may say some things that you just were not expecting at all. And then all of a sudden you found that you have a new problem. Well, that could be a good problem, so try to take it and absorb what they're saying. They're not telling you how to fix it. They may try to, but your job as an artist is to fix the problem so that it's better for the viewer. My second type of feedback crew is going to be somebody that's a little bit above that, somebody that's educated in maybe some type of art form, but maybe doesn't understand my type of art form. And that type of person I will go to when I feel like I'm complete with my artwork, and maybe I'm just not seeing something, or maybe it's just not reading what I want it to read to the viewer. So sometimes I'll get, on that type of feedback, I'll get, well, what are you really trying to say here? I'm looking at this painting and it's making me sad. And you're like, well, I really want to make you sad. I wanted to make you happy, or I wanted to make you feel melancholy, or, so whatever that feedback gives me, I'll try to work on that. And then there's my third feedback group, and that is our critique group. We have a set of core artists, and we're all professional artists. We've been working for a long time. We trust each other. We like each other's work. So we will get together every 5 or 6 weeks together and show our work to each other and get some feedback. Should I be going in this direction? Should I be going in that direction? And I think everybody needs a little bit of that. And that's a great thing to kind of form around entering competitions, because you want to encourage your peers to enter as well. It's great fun when you all enter and everybody gets in and you're hanging on the walls. It's a great time to celebrate. So I definitely want to encourage that as well. So get your feedback crew, whoever that may be. So the other topic I wanted to talk about tonight is where is this artwork being entered? And Warren kind of touched on that a little bit when he was talking about the different competitions, but a couple of different ways that some of this stuff is being entered is in person, which we don't see that very much anymore, because of COVID, but a lot of things have gone online and they're digital. So this has proven to be a little tricky for some of our members. And Warren, would you like to talk about the digital entry process?
Yes. And it isn't just COVID, but when you do something in person, you need a much bigger crew of people to work on taking all of that work in, because usually what happens is you bring all the work in, the judge comes in, looks at it and says XYZ is in, everything else is out, and then all that work has to go away, and then you have to get to the process of hanging it. So what most art organizations do these days, and especially with COVID, is we organize an online entry process. You take a picture of your work, you upload it to the website and pay the entry fees. You fill out all the information that's necessary, and then you wait for the judge to say yay or nay. It's really, really important when you get to the point where you've decided on what you're going to have in the show and now you want to take some pictures of it, to take your time First of all, to give yourself enough time to decide which work needs to be in the show. Don't rush. Try and, be out ahead of the curve on this question so that you're not feeling the crunch of, the deadline pressing you. And then think really carefully about how you're photographing something. Oftentimes you can take a very good image with your phone, but you want to make sure that the image isn't cockeyed, off kilter. You want to make sure that the horizon line, everything is in line with the horizon line. You want it to be, you don't want part of your living room table and the curtain in the background and lots of other extraneous stuff. You want it to be just that image. So even if you're shooting with your phone, after you've taken the picture, if there's a little bit too much other stuff in that besides your work, you can use the crop tool on your phone. There are several very basic editing tools on your iPhone where you can actually crop the image so that all it is just what is your piece of work and none of that extraneous stuff that's going to get in the way. Make sure that your picture is in focus. If your picture is blurry, it's going to, in a big way, it's going to be detrimental to how the judge reacts to it when they see it. Will they be able to even see it? So I would say take some pictures, and when you think you found the one that's going to work, show it to a couple of people, email it to them and ask them to see what it looks like on their phones or their computers to ensure that it's really in focus. And again, there are some basic touch-up tools on your iPhone that can correct color casts, depending on the light, and your phone is a little computer, so it's trying to interpret the cool or the warm tones of the light that you're in and make the adjustments. And sometimes it can create an unusual blue or green cast that at first you can't see it, but a trained eye, especially someone who's doing judge work, they can see that sort of thing. So there's a little magic wand tool on my iPhone. I'm sure there is one on yours. Oftentimes when I take an image with my phone, I'll just tap that and see what happens. Oftentimes it corrects that cast and also makes some adjustments to the exposure, the lights and the dark, so that something that's a little bit too dark or a little bit getting close to being blown out, they make adjustments so that they're a little less so. So pay attention to how your images look, because we're not going to be able to see your work. The judge isn't going to see your painting. They're going to see the photo of your painting. And if you take a really awful image of your painting, that's what they're going to see. So really think about that. There are some places in town that will photograph your work for a fee. You might have a friend who is a better photographer than you are. You might invite a family member to come over and work together on taking some images. Think about the way the light is playing on the surface. You don't want a lot of glare, especially if you've coated it with some sort of, varnish or something that creates a strong glare if it's in a particular kind of light. So maybe you're taking your image outside on the front porch in the shade, and you're paying close attention to at what angle there's glare. If your image, sometimes a lens will take a picture and the edges aren't straight up. They kind of go like this. There is a crop tool on your phone. It's called a perspective crop that can correct for that. So there are some basic tools, and if you don't know how to use them, Google it. You'll find out how to use them. It's quite basic and straightforward after you've played with it for a little bit. So it's really important for that. And then once you've submitted the work, and if you get into a show, you need to think about, as it was discussed earlier, what kind of frame you're going to put on it. Now we work in, for the upcoming museum show, you've got 4 weeks from when you're in the show to when you have to bring the work in. That means if you're going to have your work framed, it needs to be ready. First of all, it needs to be complete. You can't work on it after you submit it.
Oh, Warren, I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I wanted to point this out real quick, because this was a huge thing as painters, when I first began photographing my work, because I was a terrible photographer. So I'm glad you're saying all this. there, before you submit your painting, or before you go get it framed, take a picture of it, because sometimes the frame actually creates a cast shadow on the painting. And take a picture of it before you varnish it, maybe. But so because of the varnishes create a glare, and if you put glass on top of it, it's going to create a terrible glare. So that was one thing that seems like a simple thing that you would know, but I'll tell you, I made that mistake so many times. So I'm glad you brought that up, Warren.
I have too. With watercolor, I've had to take things back out of a frame to take a picture. I want to. So I'm sorry. Go ahead, Warren. It's very good advice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there was one other thing that I wanted to say, if I can remember what it was.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, that's okay. While you were talking, I thought, oh yeah, that reminds me. And then I listened some more. Oh yeah, that's right. So
Warren, can I ask a question about frames? And this is specifically for the photographers among us. In the show that we have at the Armory right now, I had one frame for that particular show, and I'm the only one who used a wood-colored frame. Everybody else had black. Does that make any difference?
a lot of galleries will talk to their artists, their photographers, about traditionally it's a black frame with a white or off-white mat, but you can sort of get really locked into that kind of straitjacket. So no, I think, and when it comes to painting, then the rules are completely different. There's all kinds of different framing that goes on, and it a lot of times has to do with what the painting, the value and the color and the saturation of those paintings, and how it reflects, how it goes with the mat. I've seen articles that say you don't want your frame to compete with your image. I've also seen some artwork where someone is painting on the frame and it becomes part of the artwork. So
That's interesting.
I guess it's,
Look up John Marin.
yeah. And Janice, who's the author, the painter from Georgia, Sarah Rakes, also does these wonderful elaborate paintings on her frame. So you can be creative. You also have to be careful.
Yeah,
And
I'll give you an
shows,
example.
I was going to say, some shows have, in watercolor, they'll tell you they won't accept things that have a mat that's not what Warren just said. If it's not off-white or light gray, they won't accept your piece when it comes. So they'll have requirements, and they want a very thin frame. They'll give you, it can't be more than, this wide. That's unusual, but that's what some of them do. So you have to be very careful. And like Warren said, oil painting is a whole different story. But.
Yeah, so my example is I had submitted a painting and was really, really proud of it and wanted to put a really nice frame on it. So I got a designer frame, because that's what I think about whenever I paint. I think of, where is this going to go? Is it going to go in somebody's home? Because I paint to sell. So not every artist paints to sell, but that was my intention. So when I got it framed, I didn't want to have to frame it again. So I know, because I'm educated in art, that you're supposed to get a frame for showing versus a frame for selling. Because when you're framing to sell, you want that designer look. You want to be able to hang it on in somebody's home, but sometimes the person wants to pick their own frame. They want this certain color, if it's silver or gold or whatever, and it may not go with the painting. So I picked a frame to go with my painting, but it was a designer frame. So when the juror selected it, I was very excited, but then when they put it, when he went to jury the piece, he almost gave me a prize, but he said, I will not give a prize to that with that awful frame on it.
Really?
So I did not get a prize because of my designer frame. I really thought about that for quite a while, and I thought, I wouldn't do anything differently. But as I have aged, I have learned that you need to you need to have purpose with everything you do and intention, right? So if my purpose is to win an award for a piece of artwork, then my intention needs to be to frame my artwork appropriately. So, there are all kinds of schools of thought with oil painting. You can, and you can go wrong so many times. It just really takes a lot of practice. I have trusted my framers now with framing the work appropriately, just as long as I give them a few parameters. And you can give them a few parameters, but you can also overthink it. Like Tim, you were saying earlier, you can really go way too far into thinking about, okay, because the framing cost, it can be outrageous sometimes too. But in school, we're taught to build our frames, and we're taught to build just a small, half inch or an inch wide with, what do you call those? The little slats. If you can tell, I don't do that. But what they're talking about, or what is very popular nowadays, which you can buy at very economical prices, are the floater frames. And when I talk about floater frames, I'm talking about something you can set into a painting. A painting you can set into the frame, and all you see is just a very thin line of the frame, because it doesn't detract from the painting at all. You want the painting to be viewable. Now that's oil paintings. And like Joan said, there's, issues for watercolors. But Joan, where do we, here in town in Montgomery, where do we go to get framing?
Okay, there are 3 excellent choices. They are locally owned, they're professional, they have years and years of experience. So I hope you've all been to them before, but we have Stonehenge, and we're going to give you the addresses afterwards, I think, or I can give them to you now, but Stonehenge. And then we have Baker's, and we have Trinity Framing, and all 3 do an excellent job. Recommend them all. I think when you go to some other places that are chains, there's a big turnover. They don't have people who do it very long quite often. They don't have the experience of putting the proper, I said I did more watercolors, but putting a matte on a picture it's huge. And so you have to have somebody that you really trust. I would just go in and I would just say, I'm not going to say who I use, but I would just say, just pick it for me. You're the expert. And they just always did a great job. And so those are the 3 that I highly recommend, all very nice. And they will really work with you and for you. And I was going to say, you do have to give yourself, I think Warren just said this, but you have 4 weeks. If you're accepted into the show, you have to know that you can get that done in 4 weeks. Mm-hmm. So you have to be prepared ahead of time, because sometimes if everyone in town is going to the same place, you have to maybe prepare ahead of time and just be ready, because if you get in, you have to be able to get it there on time. So
yes, don't delay. If you get the notice on Wednesday, you should take it to your framer on Wednesday.
Yeah, and they'll do it for you. They know.
Yeah. And but you don't want to take it in 2 weeks or a week and a half before the show, because then you're running up against what the limits of what the framer can do. So, and the same is true if you decide to frame it yourself. Give yourself plenty of time to do that work. There, as Elisa alluded to, there's all kinds of thoughts on this question. The most important for me, and when I'm submitting work or when I'm looking at someone else's work, is don't do it shoddily. Don't have someone else do it shoddily. Get the framing done to the best that you can afford, so that all that work and energy that went into creating what you think is your strongest piece of work is accentuated by the frame and it doesn't detract from what you're submitting.
Because framing isn't art. Yes, sorry, Linda, go ahead.
Oh, well, I'm a little confused. It seems like, are we supposed to submit? I read the thing, but I didn't read what they wanted. Are we supposed to submit only a picture of our painting, or as it is finished with a frame on it, or either way?
Yeah.
You would not submit it with the frame, no.
Okay,
Elisa was saying a little bit, if you have an oil painting, the frame is going to probably cast a bit of a shadow on it. And I said, anything under glass is a disaster completely.
sure.
So you definitely want to take a picture, and as Warren said, it's cropped right to the image size, just your artwork, and that's the image that you're sending to the competition.
Okay.
Definitely not framed. Don't have the frame in the picture, no.
I have a couple of questions
Thank you.
too.
Sure.
So when it asked you to submit the size, is it the size that you expect that it will be once it's framed, or is it the size without the frame that they want?
Good question.
That's one of my questions.
Often it's both, actually. They'll give you a framed and unframed. It'll usually say.
Yeah, so
Okay.
they have not, sorry that it's not more clear in the guidelines on that. But basically the reason they want the size or they limit size is due to space. So what they're looking for is, are they going to have enough space to hang your piece? And they want to make sure it doesn't exceed the size limits. So I would include that frame, because sometimes a frame is 2 or 4 more inches on either side. So I would include the frame on that. Years ago, we used to do it without the frame, but for this show in particular, the museum show, it's with the frame. Typically, they'll say whether or not they want you to include the frame. But usually the reason they're asking is so that they can have an understanding, if they're taking the entries in virtually, they can have an understanding of what it is that they're looking at, you know, because I paint a lot of small paintings and they look large when they're looked at virtually. But that's really the reason what they're looking for. So that was a great question. And
Okay.
Linda, back to your question a little bit. Remind me, you were asking about the frame. Oh, so for digital entry, I would not include the frame. Some people do, but I would advise not doing it. Then when it is accepted into the show, then you go and you can get a frame, you know, so why purchase a frame if, you know, you're not ready to frame it? But if you get into the show, then I would have it framed, and then you'll bring it to the show, to the museum with a frame on it. And make sure that whoever is framing it, they understand how to properly wire it on the back, that you don't use the sawtooth, you know, whatever they call those, the little things that you insert into the very center in the back. It has to have the wire and the hook on it. Mm-hmm.
And can I say one more thing to Linda? If you have a painting that's been professionally framed and you want to enter that, but you don't want to take it out, there you could take it someplace in town and they could do the lighting that they could photograph it for you and get a good image, because people sometimes have things already framed and they don't want to take them out. Like Capital City Filmworks,
Mm-hmm.
you know, they can photograph anything for you if it's already framed. Not under glass, but I mean an oil painting.
Thanks.
Lisa, did you have another question?
Yeah, Alicia, in the beginning, you said don't submit one, submit as many, but I thought that the application said up to 5. Am I wrong about that?
No, not at all. Thank you for bringing that back up. I'd forgotten I mentioned that. So for the museum show, you can enter up to 5 pieces, a minimum of
It is up to 5.
1, that you can enter up to 5. The reason I would encourage you to enter more than 2 is because it's kind of like the lottery, you know, the more pieces you put in, the more chances you're going to get in front of the juror. So, and believe it or not, the juror is going to be able to look at your work and determine your style. And the more they see it, even though it's randomized, let's say there are 300 entries, they're all randomized when the juror is looking at them virtually, but they're going to be able to say, you know, if you're entering all oil paintings or if you're entering all photographs, a lot of times they're going to be able to look at that and say, okay, this looks like a similar style that I've seen before. I might want to take a second look at that. You know, I've had jurors tell me that, you know, Warren mentioned blurry pictures. that does get the jurors' attention. They're not quite as apt to select it because they feel like, you know, if this is a competition, you know, are they going to award somebody with a blurry photo getting in, or are they going to, you know, not blurry photo? But these judges can sometimes be very lenient and very forgiving. I've had them say, I wanted to see that more, you know, more of that work, so I had them bring it in. So that can happen, but don't do it on purpose, you know, so that you do get noticed by the juror. A good image is really, really important to this process. And you know what, I know that Capitol Filmworks charges $30 per image. It'll take them a couple of days sometimes if they're backed up in order to get that image. It is a very high quality image. $30 is a lot of money to spend on an image. What are you going to do with that image when you're done? Well, you can have postcards made out of it. You can have cards made out of it. You can have prints done with it. So it's a very professional image. So, you know, even though it's $30, sometimes it's worth doing that if you cannot photograph it yourself. But I did want to mention, there are a couple of places you can go to learn how to do your own photograph if you use your phone. I loved this program or website. It was iPhonePhotographySchool.com. And that's iPhonePhotographySchool.com. If you have an Android, I'm sorry. I don't know another option for you, but iPhonePhotographySchool.com was a saving grace to me. It teaches you so many things, but they also talk about Snapseed, which is a free app that you can download that you can alter your images. You can make them lighter, brighter, distort them, do all kinds of things. It may be a little too robust for what you want it to do, but it does all these wonderful things and it's free. And that iPhonePhotographySchool.com, they talk about all the things, each little section in that Snapseed app, they go into great detail. So it'll talk about how you can crop, how you can take a proper photo, all those kinds of things that are basics. So I really liked that website.
One last question, if I could.
Yeah, of course.
I did not notice pottery in your list of art forms on the application, but I heard you mention it in, maybe it was you, Sunny, who mentioned it in talking about the different types of art that's submitted. Is pottery included in this show?
Absolutely. Janice, do you want to talk about pottery?
Wait just a minute. Yeah. Okay.
There you are.
So it must be called 3D. I haven't filled out my form this time, but it's usually
It
called
said
3D
sculpture.
sculpture. Yeah. So we're kind of thrown in with the you know, Michelangelo's things
Good
like
company.
that.
Of course.
But you know, we just go ahead and enter in that. But yeah, and for that, I just will say, since we're talking about photography, I used my iPhone and to take my pictures of my photography, and I haven't had any problems.
You mean
with
pottery?
that, you know, I make pottery. Yeah.
Yeah.
And she takes pictures of her pottery with her iPhone.
Yeah.
I actually emailed you, Alyssa, about that, about whether ceramics and pottery was allowed in this one. So that's really good.
It's
Yeah.
wide open. If you're producing art, this is a show that does not have a category. It's not like there's an oil category and a watercolor and a photography category. This is open to any art form. And there's a method for talking about the medium that you're working in, but that's just more for the sake of alerting the juror to what you're working in. The juror isn't going to select, you know, pieces based on category. They're going to try and select the best show in all kinds of different ways. What hangs together best, what they think is the best work. I've seen a number of shows that have a little bit more of one thing and a little less than the other, and that's all based on the jurors' subjective opinions about what works. So if you're doing pottery, by all means, submit.
I have to interject here because the last museum show 2 years ago, the juror did this wonderful thing where there was the cutest little bird sculpture. Do y'all remember this? And if you looked, because the museum's big, if you looked, the bird was right in line with this huge bird painting that Lynthia Edwards did. And it was just so cool, like how that played, and of course the two artists submitted independently of each other, but just the way that the juror was able to tie that together, it was just really cool.
The staff at the museum, when they hang things, are really pretty smart about what they do.
Yeah, they're really fabulous.
Yeah, so I did want to talk about juror selection just for a second. I've heard all kinds of things. I've jurred just a couple of smaller community shows before, and there are so many ways to go about it. Usually, whoever is putting on the show will give the jurors some parameters, and it's usually based on the guidelines or the prospectus. So really read those guidelines and the prospectus, make sure that you follow all the rules. Those are really, really key, because what happens in those situations, if the juror does not notice it, whoever is hosting the show or whatever will say, well, they didn't really follow the rules. So, do they really get in? So really make sure that you read all of those things. And, if it's not caught on the first round before it gets hung on the wall, it might get caught there. So really pay attention to the rules. That's a big thing. The second thing is because, and the reason I say that is because if you win an award and you haven't followed the rules, do you really want everybody else around you going, well, you really shouldn't have won that award. You didn't do A, B, C. That's a really sad thing to have happen. But a lot of times jurors will they have a range of things that they're going to be selecting on. Sometimes it is their experience. It is going to be on something, maybe, I've heard one juror say, I really like dogs, but am I going to pick a cute dog painting because it's cute, because I like dogs? No, but I also might be aware of the fact that I don't want to pick a cute dog painting. And if somebody submits an amazing dog portrait, am I going to say to myself, well, I can't pick that because I know this thing about myself? So there's this little inner struggle going on with a juror sometimes, and they have to really pay attention to that. Some will curate a show, so they'll start picking, they look at us as a community as a whole, and they start deciding, what things go well together. What is there a theme they're starting to see throughout the community? So there are all these different things that that happen when the juror is making their selection. So don't be afraid to submit something if you think it's different. Even the more the reason for people to be able to see it. This is your time to have a voice. And also, if it's a medium that you're not quite sure about, email us, send us a picture. We'll be happy to tell you, if we think that you should submit it. And 99% of the time, we're going to say, yes, we think you should submit it, because we have seen some amazing things in the past couple of years that we just want to continue to see more. And people think that their garage art, that they've been creating, I don't know if anybody saw the museum show last year, but Vincent Buwalda won Best of Show for his mechanical contraption that was just a big head that he just thought nobody would even like, and it won Best of Show. So if you've been in your garage creating something for years, I guarantee you, if there's a drive within you that has made you want to create these things, then people need to see it. Are there any topics? We've kind of talked about the who, what, when, where, how, why, but are there any questions that anybody else has, or any other topics that you want to hear us talk about?
I have one question, actually. You were talking about frames a little bit earlier, and with certain shows, I know that they ask for like the measurements of the piece. should I incorporate the frame into that measurement? Or like, if you're not going to get the frame before you get into the show, how would you measure that out?
Yeah, so we kind of talked about this earlier. When people ask for, or in a competition, when they ask for the dimensions, usually they want you to include that frame, or they'll say whether they want you to include it or not include it. We did not make it clear on this, on the entries for the museum show, but go ahead and include that frame size, because they're looking for space. You know, they take all those dimensions and sizes and they say, okay, well, how much wall space do we have? And do they fit within the, they will have to fit in with the guidelines. So whatever is in the guidelines, the max limit on size, we definitely want to make sure you don't exceed that.
Got it. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome, Sarah.
Can I ask another question about framing?
Yeah.
That is can you have gallery wraps, or because frames add up in the price when people have, if you have 5 pieces, which is the limit, and you spend $100 per frame or 2, I don't know how much it would be, but you know, is there any way to save money on framing that isn't going to look crummy? Can you buy it online? Can I maybe Michael's? I'm just asking this because I think that money is definitely an issue for people.
Great question.
Yeah, that is a great question. We definitely, you know, I have done my fair shopping of frames and have decided that 2021, I was not going to have a framing bill anymore. So let me grab something real quick to show you guys what a floater frame looks like. And it is something that that if you have a handy husband, okay, or if you're a handy girl, no offense, girls, you can definitely build a standard style, what did I just call it? Floater frame.
Floater frame.
A floater frame, yeah. And Joan, talk to them a little bit more about framing and prices and why you don't want to do a Michael's or Hobby Lobby scenario.
Well, I just know that, especially if you do custom framing at Michael's or Hobby Lobby, it's going to cost you sometimes more than if you go to one of our local frame shops. And that is the truth. They say it's discounted 50%, but it'll be more. And I just don't know that they give you exactly the same quality, just because what I said before, their turnover is so high at those places. And so can you buy a ready-made frame at some of those places that will fit? You know, if you have a good eye, you know, yes, you can do that. And that will, you know, it depends on what your talents are as far as seeing what will go with it. I do, and you asked about gallery wrap, and I think that's a great choice because then you don't need a frame. And it depends if your piece, you know, if you want your piece to look the best it can. And what Elisa is talking about is the floater frame is so nice because it leaves it open. You know, your piece expands. Sometimes a frame can close it in. And I think that's what's nice about just the gallery wrap. You know, your piece stands on its own. So, but it has to go, you know, with what your artwork is. And that's an individual choice, but you can get a professional's advice on that. I don't know if I'm answering that question.
And I don't know if I have a real educated opinion on this, but I think that if you're going to gallery wrap something, it has to be part of the image. Don't get sloppy on the gallery, on the wrapping, you know, the painting on the sides, you know, try and incorporate it into the image somehow. I think
exactly what I do.
Yeah, I think if you don't, you run the risk of those frames sort of standing out and calling attention to it.
Yeah, so when we talk about gallery wrapped, there are canvases or there are wood panels. And when we talk about the gallery wrapped, we're talking about the wrapping of the canvas goes all the way around like this, right? So this is a cradled panel. What they did was they took a piece of wood and they mounted it to this board, which I mean, if you're handy with a saw and you can miter those edges, you can build these. They're very economical. The gallery wrapped, when you paint them, you can paint your image across to the side if you want. It's very laborious, but it's also a skill set. But just painting the sides a solid color all the way around is also very acceptable. Just make sure that it's complete, like Warren is saying, you know, complete your edges all the way around. That is perfectly acceptable. You don't have to frame it if it is gallery wrapped. What they're gonna do is they're gonna hook the wire onto the back right here, so it's not, you know, on the sides or anything. So you have a nice flush image with the wall. On this floater, on this what are they call these elephant boards in Charleston, because that's where I got these originally. They started making them, so I always want to call them an elephant board, but they're not called elephant boards. What are they called, Joan? Cradled panels. I'm sorry, cradled panels.
Never used one. I don't know.
Yeah. So anyway, so what a floater frame looks like is like this. So your canvas just sets right into there. And there's usually an edge right here between it and the canvas. So that's why you want to paint the edge of your canvas when you put it in here. So and so see this nice thin edge, you can paint it any color, and they come in all kinds of styles. They come in gold and silver and all these different kinds of flavors. They can be very economical. You can find some floater frames at Michael's. I would recommend buying them online at, you know, a reputable source, but Trinity Framing can do, any of the framers can do any of the floater frames. I know that Trinity has a few economical styles. They're very standard, so that you're not going to have many choices, but that's what you get with economical, right? You either get a silver or a gold, I believe, or even maybe a brown. But that's what the floater frames look like. And they're very nice because they don't detract from the painting at all. Did anybody have another question about the framing? Framing's such a big issue. It's really a big issue, and it is a big expense. And if you don't get all 5 pieces in, don't go through the trouble of framing them. So, you know, that's why we say, take your pictures before, don't rush and get it framed. And let me just implore you, don't go to yard sales and buy frames. Can I tell you how many frames I have from yard sales? When I first started painting, the first thing I did was, you know, somebody was having an estate sale and they were having a clearinghouse of frames. And you know that I just recently passed all those frames on to someone else that said he had painting for those, because you're not going to paint a picture for a frame. You know, the frames are beautiful. I mean, but how many artists have frames stuck around in corners? Every one of us. We could probably let anybody borrow some.
I'd like to ask a framing question. If I'm not mistaken, I think that what you said was that for photography, for entering some shows, that there's no option but black. So a color like silver or champagne don't even think about investing in that, just do black. Is that what I heard you basically say for photography?
Well, for this show, there are no stipulations on what kind of framing or matting to do. That's up to you. If you're entering the Society of Arts and Crafts and Stonehenge Photo Festival show later this summer, the recommendation is a standard black frame with a white or off-white mat, but it's a recommendation. I saw various other frames come into that show last year. So you just have to read through the guidelines and see what the suggestions are. There are some very high-end photo competitions that say black frames, white mats, nothing else. But that's not the case for the museum show. And you just have to look through the perspectives and see what they're telling us, as artists they want.
But since framing is so expensive, I'm guessing that your suggestion is stay with the black, it'll be the most versatile.
Well, it's up to you. I don't want to tell you because I have a personal preference, but that doesn't make it right. My preference is black with a white mat. I just like the way it looks, and a mat that's not super thick.
I'm not using mats with what I'm doing, but
Yeah,
yeah.
something that that lets the image stand out, and sort of cuddles it on the wall, but doesn't overwhelm it, squeeze it to death.
Yeah, okay. Another question I wanted to ask is about artist statements. Are you looking for that at all?
I believe we did have a request for artist statements this year. In years past, what we had when people delivered their artwork, they would bring an artist statement and we would put them in a binder for people to flip through the binder. We talked about going ahead and continuing to do that, but I know people due to COVID probably will not be touching things. So we're still kind of in discussion about what we're going to do with those artist statements, whether, you know, they'll be available in another format or what. Warren, do you have any thoughts on that?
Not specifically in terms of what we might end up doing with artist statements, but I will say, when you write an artist statement, make it clear, make it readable, don't get too poetic, and let it really reflect your work. I've read artist statements where I can't believe, sometimes I see an artist statement and I can't look at the work. I just can't look at the work. And other times I look at the artist statement and I think, wow, I got to look at this work. To tell you the truth, I almost never read the statement. I go look at the work first, then I read the statement. So just take care when you do it and have someone look at it. Have somebody do a little copy editing, look for punctuations, spelling errors, syntax. And nothing kills a statement quicker, even if it's readable, then, you know, it's understandable. It isn't just gibberish. To say something in a way that is, you know, convoluted, or a glaring missing punctuation. So take your time with it. And this is just my own personal opinion on these things. You know, everybody has their own style and will write it in their own way, but that's how I try and write my statements. Make them short and sweet and to the point, try to express the essence of whatever it is that I'm trying to show and leave it at that. Let the work speak.
How about artist bios?
How about bios? Well, so let me just go back to the artist statement for a second. An artist statement can be ever evolving. You know, I always try to think about it as, you know, I need to change mine right now because it doesn't really reflect my current work. So it needs to be like maybe a paragraph. A bio, you want to go into a little bit more about maybe your credentials, you know, not like a resume, but maybe what you've been doing with your art career. What are you doing now with it, you know, past, present, future scenarios. That would be more of a bio. And I don't think we're requesting bios for this show. If anything, statements, just so that it gives a little description of, but you can also include your website or, you know, any of that information, but we're going to try to make that stuff accessible virtually as well, so that, you know.
So if my work is up in a virtual gallery for sale, I can include that?
Yes, I don't know if we're going to be doing a virtual for sale gallery for this.
No. I'm saying that my work is up someplace else.
I see.
Can I make that leap? Can I put, if you'd like to see more of Lisa Newcomb's work, look at and state the gallery and the
I think it just depends
website to it.
Yeah, I think it just depends on the situation. You know, what website is it? Who's displaying your work? What are their, you know, do they promote your other websites, things like that? Sometimes they only do self-promotion. They only want to see.
Well, if they allow it, is that something you should include?
Oh yeah, definitely. Any kind of self-promotion for sure. Anytime you self-promote, I think you should always do that.
Yeah, and most shows often will. Some shows will, photo shows that I've submitted to will, you know, say if you have a website or something included in the information that you sent to us.
Okay.
Great
Yeah,
questions.
I submitted a show to, I think it's the Pike Road Arts Council,
Mhm.
and they had a virtual show for it, and they wanted the artists to like comment on the photograph of the work they posted with their website and email address, and then they, I mean, they had an email for the for purchase inquiries, but so far I think I was the only one that went back and was like, yeah, I want to make sure that people know where to find me if they want to see more of my work. I think for digital stuff, that's key. Like, I mean, I would assume it'd be really good to keep that with the work.
Yeah, definitely. I think here in, I don't want to put down the South, but I've lived in the South. I've lived in Alabama my whole life, but it's not been an important factor because art has not been really celebrated as much as it has been in recent years and purchased. So, you know, now we're finding, you know, new ways to use social media and you know, websites and like entering shows. I have gotten so many comments and compliments and calls regarding my work hanging in the museum. You know, people say, oh, I didn't know you were an artist. I walked by your artwork the other day and saw it in the museum. So, you know, it's that's another way to promote. You know, put it on your Facebook. Say, hey, I got accepted in the museum show. I'll be hanging there. Go check it out. Go see the museum. That's a wonderful time, and like I said, it's all summer, so you get a lot of exposure that way.
Yeah, and when we get to the other side of COVID, go to all the art exhibits that you can manage to. I'm telling you, when I came here 7 years ago, Janice and I said, we're going to go to every exhibit that we can try into. And we have, and it has taken both of us places we never even dreamed were possible when we first came here. So you just have to go get it.
Right. Well, do we have any other questions? We don't, we love spending time with you guys talking. It's almost 8, believe it or not. Did anybody have any other questions?
I have a quick one. Does the work have to be for sale, or is it for sale? Because sometimes I know museums don't usually, like, may not sell work like in the show. At least in my experience, they've like referred people back to the artists and they don't handle the sale. But is this particular one that would be for sale?
Yes, definitely. All of our shows, we try to promote the artists. You can put the work for sale. So when you enter your work into the art call, it'll ask you for a price.
Okay.
If you don't want to have it for sale, a lot of people don't, then you'll just put 0 and the tag will show NFS or not for sale. If someone coming through the museum is interested in your work, and we have sold some pieces through the museum before, from just visitors walking through, the museum will direct them directly to me, and then I will contact the artist directly. And we do get a small percentage. I think it's 25%. Warren, is that correct?
20 or 25.
Yeah.
It'll be listed in the guidelines.
Yeah, in the guidelines. So we will take a small percentage of that, and there's a little time delay. You know, as soon as the person calls, the transaction doesn't happen immediately, unfortunately, but you know, we get money in hand and then we transfer it to the artist and whatnot. But yes, we definitely want you to have your work for sale if that's what you would like to do. And people have called, and you know, they have no relationship to the artist, have never seen the artist's work, and walked through and just, I remember one guy saw a photograph. I think it was of it wasn't a cemetery, but something like that. And he said he just stood there for a long, long time and went back to the museum 2 or 3 times and decided he had to have that piece. And you know, it resonated with him. And you know, what a great thing to, as an artist, that you know, not only somebody likes your work, it resonates with them, but they want to purchase it and put it on their walls so they can see it even more. So we, we definitely think that that is, that's most of our end goal, right? So we can produce more work if we get some money and pay for those framing bills. So I just want to thank Sunny Paul again, and Joan DeLaura and Warren Simons for helping me with this project. This was one that was kind of dear to me because I have so many friends that are entering or want to enter. And I just really hope that you guys were encouraged tonight. And if you continue to have questions, please email us. We are more than happy to answer your questions anytime. Deadline is March 20th, and that's virtually. And the juror is Wendy Castanel. So go to the website, www.montgomeryartguild.org, and you can go there and find the link to the prospectus and submit your work. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Elisa. Thank you,
Thank
everybody,
you.
for being here.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
everybody.
You guys did a great job. Appreciate it.
Good luck,
Alrighty.
everybody.
Nice to meet
Thank
you.
you.
All right. Good night, everybody. I'm going
Good
to
night.
discontinue this call.
Good night.
Alrighty. Bye.
Bye.